Good evening, everyone. I'm Dharna, and I extend all of you a very warm welcome on behalf of Modern School. And today we have a very special guest for a session for you all. And before I introduce her, I would like to reiterate that this session is specially for the parents, keeping in mind the parents this time. And of course, if there are any students in the session, you're always welcome. And so here it is. Modern School is a multiverse of academic and holistic enrichment of its students. We are delighted to introduce Ms.Viveka Peter, a lawyer by profession and a mother by choice. Ms. Viveka is an Australian who has a degree in law from the reputed Monash University in Melbourne and is currently settled in Michigan, USA. She's been a practicing counsel for a multinational consultancy, and she has also got the master's degree in sociology with a specialisation in gender and family. As the motherhood beckoned, she embraced an intended and well-meaning hiatus to raise her beautiful children. Ms. Viveka will be talking on the benefits of routine in children, how to adapt to it during COVID-19, and she will share her experiences and offer a parent-to-parent word of the wise. We welcome you, Ms. Viveka, and we are very, very fortunate to have you on board today. Thank you so much for your, taking our time for our children, for our parents, for our community. And we welcome you on board. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you for joining me on the webinar, everyone. It's so nice to see everyone's faces. As you can tell, it's morning here, and I hear it's tea time over there. So I hope you have your cup of tea. I've got my morning coffee. I would like to thank Mrs. Dana Gupta and Mr. Vaibhav Singh and Dr. Deepak Singh for inviting me to be the keynote speaker for your webinar series tonight. Thank you to the parents and the children for joining me, and to faculty as well. I've actually had the pleasure of listening to a lot of the webinars that have been recorded, and I want to commend Modern School. It's such a great gift that you're giving the school community to hear from an esteemed panel of varied people to talk about really important issues that we're facing right now in this social and economic climate. And I'm a fellow parent, so I'm very humbled to be amongst this panel. The world is facing this really big shift right now, and for the first time we're seeing this reevaluation of how we do things and what we can offer our children to offer them the very best of health and education. And Modern School has been very tremendous in hosting these really insightful webinars. And I too am very passionate about parenting and purposeful parenting, so that we can have a feeling of being valued and valuable, strong and confident, healthy and well. And I really believe these are the best gifts that we can offer our children during this uncertain time. So, as you know, my topic today is the benefit of routine for our children and how we can offer a wholesome experience to our children during this pandemic. And I'll cover also how our family has implemented routines and adapted it for this pandemic right now, while people are working remotely and children are remote schooling and accommodating the lockdowns and the quarantines. If you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat box and I'll be happy to address them at the end. I understand that Ms. Gupta has some allocated time and she can field them over to me. So just to give you a little bit of my background, I'm sure you're a little bit aware. I'm Australian, as you can tell from the accent, and I was born and raised in Melbourne. I attended a private school called PLC. It's kind of like Modern School, Presbyterian Ladies College. And when I was 17, I attended Monash University, and I earned an LLB, or Bachelor of Laws, and an honours degree in a Bachelor of Arts, and I majored in Sociology. My dissertation was actually on gender and family. So I have very fond memories of my time at school, both at PLC and at Monash, as I'm sure you all do at Modern School as well. In 2005, I was admitted to the Supreme Court of Victoria as a barrister and a solicitor. And I practiced law for many years in Melbourne and Sydney in private practice. And then I took on a corporate counsel role at Accenture, which is a global consulting firm. And I was in charge of the non-transactional employment law matters across 12 countries in Asia, including India actually. And, you know, it was an amazing time in my career, and I was finally enjoying the fruits of my labor and all the hard work at school and university. And I had worked extremely hard to get there. And I was now tackling these 15-hour days, but I really reveled in the excitement and the fast pace. And during that time, I actually met my husband, who is Indian, and he's born and raised in the US. And so almost 2 years later, we married and ended up settling in the United States. While he was completing his fellowship training, we lived in New York, and then now we live in Michigan. My husband works really long hours, and so we made this decision that once we would have a family, that I would actually stay home. And it was something that was very important to both of us, because we were both raised with mothers at home, and so we saw the value in that. We have 4 children, and they're aged between 2 and 10. And, you know, they're super fun and active, and they've really allowed me to like utilize my skills in corporate world at home. And so I've implemented a lot of structure and rules. And, you know, I really believe that these are the fundamentals that small children will thrive on. And I've watched the success in, you know, keeping these structures, and they're very predictable, especially during this time of the pandemic, which I will go through very soon. So I've been home with my children for about a decade, and we saw a lot of value. You know, if I was to go back to being an attorney to the same level I was at, we knew that it would pull me away from the home, and the children would end up in like paid childcare, or they'd be raised by nannies. And I've never regretted that decision. You know, I miss corporate life. I miss the demands of it, but I see the tremendous impact that me being home has had on my children, that I really think that no one else could have replaced. You know, I taught them to read and ride their bikes, and supported them through friendships and schooling, successes, failures. I've probably learned more about myself as a parent than I actually did as a lawyer, because I feel that children aren't the only people that are constantly being taught or learning. I do feel that grown-ups are also constantly receiving valuable lessons too, if they're willing to take them. So I do think that children learn outside of a textbook, and we will discuss this more when we talk about adapting this learning environment for the children during the pandemic. You know, we are, as their parents, their daily teachers, and we're their first teachers. And so the pandemic actually gives us this really unique opportunity to teach our children about life and community, and you know, just about being a good human, and teaching them, you know, how to make good decisions, and to be happy and kind and honest, and have integrity, and have a strong work ethic. And so these are really the ultimate goals of parenting. So today I'll be talking about the benefits of routine, and keeping the routine in general, and how that can lend itself to a general mental calm and happiness. Knowing what is expected and knowing what is going to happen next really does mitigate outbursts and meltdowns and resistance and anxiety in your children. And part of that routine that we're going to talk about too is sleep, physical and mental health, which I know your previous webinar speakers have spoken about, and also eating well, and how feeding your body is also crucial to that sense of calm, and it's really an ingredient to that recipe of success in the household. You know, sleep, rest, eating well, they make happy children, and children who can thrive at their optimum level. And then finally, we'll talk about the essentials in creating that wholesome experience, and how to make your household thrive right now and be successful when the world around us is so unpredictable and scary. And, you know, really, like I said, our goal as parents is to keep things as light and as positive as possible for our children, because they shouldn't take on the worries of the world on their shoulders right now. This pandemic really shouldn't be an interruption in our children's growth and educational path, but instead it should be a learning experience. And we can also ask, like, what can we learn as parents, and view it as a really good time to teach the children without it being a moment of fear or distress or negative learning, but perhaps take pause and really learn things that we never had to learn before. And we'll explore this. So let's get right into it. First, we're going to talk about the benefits of sleep on a person's health and well-being, and then we'll talk about the diet. But routine really offers our children the opportunity to learn discipline in daily life, and staying organized is really crucial to applying these principles to everyday habit, to create habit for children. And so good routine, can be really difficult right now because we're juggling learning, and also from a parent's perspective, we're juggling work from home, which is, unprecedented. This has never happened before. So the question is, how can we effectively use powerful strategy of routines in our lives? And, routines can do many things for us. They can be a positive constraint on our choices. They can limit the number of choices that we have to make. And they can keep us on this path that we're headed on. And not just that, but they enable that action too. So while they're constraining our choices, they provide us with this momentum to move forward and offer us coherence that things that we're doing make sense. There's, a sense of stability, that it's a positive affirmation that we're doing the right thing. So, routines give children a lot of stability because when they stay on this path, they remain stable, the routines are predictable, and that's really key during this pandemic. So when we consider children, they really do thrive when things are predictable, when their day is predictable and routined. And so the number of choices will have to get limited for them. And the path will then be predictable and offer them safety during this pandemic. As a parent, it's very hard to balance being this authoritarian figure, who makes the rules and enforces them, and then also being this nurturer who tends to their social and emotional well-being. And this is actually one instance where I do feel that they are not mutually exclusive, but really, setting those boundaries for parents is absolutely necessary for the child's well-being. It tells them that they're loved and they're cared for, and that you care about their well-being. And so, when we look at a specific routine for children, they really do vary from age to age, but they ultimately need the routine. I mean, what I expect from my 2-year-old is vastly different from what I expect from my older children. And a good tool for keeping children on track for the routine is to have a checklist. You can add rewards to it. Sometimes I bribe my children with the checklist. And once you indoctrinate these tasks into the daily practice, it becomes the routine for the children. And that's the end goal, to make all the daily tasks something that occurs over and over. Because we know that when we have repetition, we're practicing skills over and over, and the brain is a muscle, and it needs to be exercised just like everything else. So it's all about that training and indoctrination. So when children are young, you can do daily tasks with them or have their routines set for simple things like making their bed, combing their hair, packing their school bag, anything that will give them this sense of accomplishment and merit. And then as they get older, I would add more responsibility. So things like knowing when to complete their homework, being able to pack the bag for themselves, and helping with household chores, or even preparing dinner. My 10-year-old helps me a lot with preparing dinner and setting the table for the family meal. From about March, I had the children home from school during the pandemic, and we had kind of blocks for their routines. So during the school day, the blocks would be like mealtime, studies, reading, a bit of outdoor play. And they were basically the key components of their day. And then when school finished for us in June for our summer break, we ended up keeping these same blocks in the absence of school mandated schoolwork. And what we did was we replaced them with the sort of free choice schoolwork. And it really gave the children a sense of control, that they can choose then what sit down activity they would do, whether it was writing or journaling or mathematics. But really that primary purpose was to still offer the children some sort of quiet, structured learning. And then they do a bit of reading after lunch, but really they get that free time in the afternoon, and that's the best time for us because they kind of need to run off and blow off steam. You know, sometimes in the summer, and I know the Indian summer can get very hot, sometimes we move things around. So like today is supposed to be a very hot day, and so I think the children will probably go outside in the morning, and then in the afternoon when it's very hot, they'll come in and utilize that time to be cool inside and then do their schoolwork or their reading indoors at that time. You know, but ultimately the routine is very clearly set for the children, and they move very successfully between the activities, and they know that each block has a start and it has an end time, and so it's very predictable, even for my 2-year-old, to really know what those days' activities are and know what their expectations are. And they do seem to be more focused and better behaved as well on those days. I find when you don't implement the routines, or if we have a day where we kind of stray from it, the children just generally poorly perform through their day, and they're flooded with decisions that they have to make, and the, you know, decisions aren't constant. So you're giving, you know, these children then now they have to figure out how they're going to navigate through the day, and they've lost their routine, and so, you know, it's very important that even when, you know, you do kind of deviate from that routine, there's still some sense of like a block of expectation, and that they can predict the day. So when we think about routine, I do want to say that they don't have to be these awful routines that you impose. I don't think they should be viewed as punishment. Like I said before, they're really what parents are setting for the best for their children. I want to talk briefly about technology. Technology has been a really hot topic amongst my friends, and I know during the pandemic we kind of were picking each other's brains about where we stood with this. Every family is very different, and in my house, my children, they rarely have screen time, and this is actually both on school days and on non-school days. And both before the pandemic and during the stay-at-home order. And you may wonder why, and I get asked that a lot by friends, what my position actually is. I guess my 2-year-old, she uses the iPad the most, and that's because some of these apps are, or most of the apps actually for her, are very educational, and they're great for this super fast pace that she's learning at. And then after about 5 or 6, I'm sure the parents here can relate, you know, technology becomes kind of like a wormhole, and it's sort of where these children get drawn to games and YouTube and these mindless videos. I know my son will watch these videos of people opening Kinder surprises or things like that, and they love it, and I don't understand it, but you know, I have to limit it, and so I offer minimal supervised screen time for my older children, and they usually engage in Khan Academy or Prodigy, which are mathematical platforms, or Epic. I'm not sure if you use Epic, but Epic for reading, which is really great, especially for the early readers. And I have discovered that anything more than 30 minutes that I offer them, my children become like zombies and they're just socially like less than what they could be. And so my husband and I both would rather that they just pick up a book or just go outside and even sit under a tree. Not everyone will share this view with us, and that's okay. You know, as parents, you have to find your own peace in your household and determine what is right for your family and for your child. People's ideology on technology, it can be really polarizing, and you have to really decide what is best for you. I've never actually had a complaint about the routine or these rules from any of my 4 children. They understand the rules, they expect it. Again, it comes back to that indoctrination. We've never really changed from that position. And interestingly, when their friends come and visit, they respect it too. I haven't had a friend come over and say, oh, you know, can we play, you know, some sort of computer game? So during the pandemic lockdown though, I did find myself trying to figure out how, you know, what my like lockdown position was going to be, and establish what my thoughts were going to be regarding technology now that my children were required to use it during remote learning. And my husband and I, you know, had really only offered technology very minimally and infrequently. We'd actually never even taken an iPad to a restaurant. And so now here we were with their school asking our children to sit at the computers for most of the day, and do Zoom calls for most of the day. And it was definitely, especially for me, an inner struggle. And we wanted our children to do well in school. And we really felt that we didn't want them to be placed at a disadvantage for not being as familiar with technology as perhaps some of their friends who had their own phones and tablets. So I definitely feel that exposure to technology is important. Children need to progress, so do we, but it's about finding that balance. And so, you know, even beyond school, I know many of us have offered technology to our children just to survive the pandemic. And, you know, as I said before, we're facing this unprecedented stay-at-home order, and, you know, our children are bored. They can lack socialization. They're not seeing their friends. They're perhaps isolated. I've seen it with some of my friends that have only children. Those children really struggle. And then you take into account perhaps those only children have both parents working from home. Perhaps even there's no outside space that's adequate to really meet their physical play needs. So, you know, the question is, how do we temper this overuse of technology during the pandemic? And it can be very easy and safe to just let our children use the technology to get the work done. It's quiet, we have them occupied. You know, once the child is already with their phone or their iPad or their Kindle or computer game, I know it's hard to suddenly pull back and take a privilege away. And so, you know, we're struggling with remote working, and we're trying to make things a little sweeter for the children who are struggling in their own isolation and remote schooling. It's just very easy to give an iPad to a kid. And so to the parents that have these questions in their mind right now and are in these situations, I would suggest a good compromise. So you can still offer technology to your children, but perhaps offer definitive periods of use. So for example, allow the device to only be used in the afternoon after they've completed some sort of household chore or done some physical exercise. And I would also urge you to consider using technology in a more educational way. And your children may not even notice that you're doing this. I do this all the time. It's a little trick I do. I have them go and I have them research something for me. And they're actually using the technology to research this topic for me. And then I have them maybe research a recipe and then write out their ingredients. So there you go. You've got your literacy, you know, skills as well. You can have them give a little presentation at dinner time. Then you've got your leadership skills factored in too. So they may not even realize that they are now learning and you're teaching them. And so I would urge parents, just be creative in how you want your children to learn during this pandemic. No matter what position you take, and I touched on this earlier before, parents should really stick to the rules. Don't ever feel worried about your rules. And I'll preface it with this: don't change your rules with the weather. Consistency is going to be key to its success and effectiveness. As a grown-up, you can decide what you impose in your household, and you know, that should be something that all caregivers discuss and they all agree to. No caregiver should undermine it, and then you know, and then implement it. And the problem is, once you do undermine it, the children see it. They're very clever. You know, they see that it can be challenged, and you will have problems with that. And so, change in a routine really shouldn't occur. Because you'll compromise the indoctrination of that rule. You know, a rule that has been followed for years and years, you know, is more likely to be followed. But when you start changing it, that's when it becomes hard for the child to respect that it's really important in the household. So that would be what I would say about that. You know, we all want our children to flourish at school, and we know that they also need proper sleep and food as part of the routine. And so let's talk about that briefly. I think one of the biggest complaints that I hear from my fellow friends and parents and mum friends, and I'm sure this is universal, is usually some complaint regarding sleep. You know, your child is not sleeping enough. Perhaps your child is sleeping too much. I don't have that problem in my house, so my children don't sleep enough. Or it could also be something related to their eating habits. You know, during this pandemic, or before this pandemic rather, we were all rushing to be somewhere. You know, the morning juggling the children's morning and our morning commute was something that was very, common before the pandemic. And now after the pandemic, we're still juggling the children's morning, but we're now, very eager to get to our own desks to start our own work and to log in and send those emails and check the emails. And, so the question is, we have to go back to the night before. Is your child getting enough sleep? And we know that children thrive on regular bedtime routine and getting enough sleep every single night. And so this is proven by science. We know this. It's crucial for social and mental functioning, overall health, no matter what the age, in fact. And we knew this before the pandemic, that sleep disturbances can actually lead to some pretty difficult behaviors in children and in their health. Things like irritability, which I'm sure most parents see. I see it a lot in my third child. The inability to concentrate, obesity, headaches. So, well-rested children with a regular bedtime routine, they're going to have a better overall health and better behavior, actually, and better school performance and memory. And so while the sleep needs of children will vary from person to person, we have very reasonable science-based guidelines to really determine whether our children are getting enough sleep. I don't have the guidelines for India, but the American Academy of Pediatrics here released guidelines for the total amount of sleep in a 24-hour period needed by children. And for this webinar, and what's relevant is the school age amount. So looking at a school age child, we'll say, 6 to 18, you're looking at about 9 to 12 hours of sleep every night. And often children will get less sleep when there's disruptions in their schedule. And the pandemic is a really good reason for this. Children not getting enough sleep, and parents are worrying about their own mental health and well-being, and they need to function, and we're all a little bit distracted. I know that when my children don't sleep well the night before, it really is a disruption for my husband and myself. And we're both usually up. And then that next morning we have this feeling of like a brain fog, that we're one step behind in our daily tasks. And so a child's sleep can really impact the entire family. And so, now more than ever with the pandemic, this rest is really important for children because they have to be more self-vigilant and self-regulatory in their studies during this remote learning. Sitting in front of a computer for so long is actually like unprecedented and so fatiguing. My 7-year-old son really struggled with this. He was sitting at the desk for most of the morning, and those mornings he struggled, and then he struggled even more on the mornings after a disrupted night of sleep. And my husband and I, we even took him to an eye doctor because he kept complaining of headaches. And what we discovered was that his eyes were actually getting dry. And quite simply, the ophthalmologist told us he just needed more rest. So now more than ever, we need our children well rested for the day ahead for remote learning. I think there's a huge misconception that children can skip a little bit of sleep here and there and that they'll be okay and that they can catch up. And it's really not the case, because have you ever noticed as a parent when your child stays up late one night, they're usually up the same time the next morning. And like I said before, I'm still waiting for my children to sleep in. They will stay up and they'll still get up at the crack of dawn. And, unfortunately, that loss of sleep can accumulate over the course of a week. And finally, what happens is they crash and they melt down. So to help some parents with this sleep routine, I'm going to tell you about the 4 Bs. And so in my family, we follow the 4 Bs, which is bath, brush, book, and bed. And so this happens about 40 minutes before bedtime. We take the children, they have a bath, the school-age children take their own bath, they'll brush their teeth, and then they choose a book, and they'll either read it together with us or independently, just depending on their reading level. And bedtime is really that time for no stimulation. So what we do is we don't play any games. There's no more eating, there's no homework, we're not taking phone calls, the TVs are off, the computers are off, the phones are put away. It's really a winding down time where we relax and we regroup as a family after a long day, and we can talk about the happenings of the day. We can also make plans of action for the next day. You know, I'll ask my children what's happening tomorrow in school, or how do you feel about the next day? And we just generally like start that melatonin releasing from the brain in preparation for sleep. And so this switch off, I should use quotation marks, the switch off is actually even more important now during the pandemic, when we are using technology so much. It's really important that we learn how to switch things off. Oops, I just saw one of my children walk by. So the evening sleep routine has been the same routine we've kept for years, actually, probably since we've been having children, and we keep it for the weekends too. If you don't do it, I recommend you try it, especially for the families that do struggle with routines and bedtime and, especially with young children. And in the morning, after the rest of sleep, children can be very different, and just expect that. We have some children that wake up bright and early and they're refreshed and they're ready for the day. And then we have other children who they need a little bit more time to get moving. And so each of my 4 children are vastly different, as are my husband and myself. I'm not a morning person, even though it's morning now and I seem very chipper. I'm actually not a morning person. I'm really a night owl, which I have in common with Mr. Baba Singh. I know he's a night owl too. And my husband's very much a morning person. My oldest is a morning person, just like my husband, and she's just like him. And my second daughter is very much like me, and she's so cute. She'll exit the bed in stages. She'll have one eye open, one eye closed, and one leg's out, and then she sort of tumbles out, and she's half asleep while she's brushing her teeth. She looks a lot like me, I think, doing that. The key is you really have to adjust your morning routine for each of your children, because you can't change your children. So if you have a child who, is a self-starter, I would employ him or her to help you with the morning tasks, taking the dog out, helping with the breakfast or the tea, helping with younger siblings. And then if you have a child that needs a bit more time, I would give it to them and perhaps consider letting them have either a little bit of extra sleep and try to save that somewhere else by giving them a breakfast that takes less time to prepare, like a ready-made muffin, as opposed to eggs that need cooking. Or you may consider waking that child up 5 or 10 minutes earlier, just so that they don't feel rushed and they can amble through their morning a little bit more easily. If you choose this, however, I would urge you to remember what we talked about just earlier about altering their bedtime so that you're accounting for any sleep lost or gained, because you don't want to lose that amount of sleep over the course of a week. Every day, 5 or 10 minutes might not seem like very much, but by the end of the week, it could be an hour of sleep lost that your child, is now missing. So just remember that every child is different, and developmentally, it will also impact their morning readiness. Some children are still learning decision-making skills, that are required to get dressed and ready in the morning. And so this takes more time for children to master, and you can definitely help them speed along in the morning by reducing the number of decisions a child needs to make. Again, coming back to what we were talking about routine and limiting the number of decisions that children can make, making it predictable for them. So what we often do is we have the children's clothes out for school. I know the modernites wear uniform, but perhaps you could have the uniform ready with their undergarments. It really does speed things up. And then you can also have the bags packed in the evening time, anything to really successfully move your children through the routines. And as I said before, it relates back to what we talked about the positive constraints. I see my husband walking behind I'm not sure why he's not at work yet. I thought he was a morning person, right? So we need to enable children to make, fewer choices to allow them to be more successful in the morning. Be gentle on them. Don't expect too much and get mad at them when they're slow, especially now, during this pandemic. Children are already dealing with so much change, and now is the time to teach them life skills and be encouraging and kind to them. It's important that they feel that we're on their side and that we're all, on the same team, and that team is the household team, working together towards a common goal. In my house, we actually all put our hands together and we do a whoa team. We've been doing that for years, since they were little. It really does foster this excitement for a group effort and meeting household goals. My son in particular loves it. And so, children love doing things like that, but it's really anything that you can do to, create this excitement. It's something that I learned in corporate life that actually translates really well to home life. And so just remember that it's better to be late than to scold your children, like first thing in the morning, especially before their day has started. It's very easy right now to feel super frustrated, especially when children are being difficult and we're frustrated that we're stuck at home. We have nowhere to go. We must manage the children's remote schooling, but we have our own work to do. And so we can get very short with our children. With no place to go, it also is natural to feel very lazy or sluggish and lacking energy to really get the day started. You will want to give up the routine just to make life easy. And I do believe that keeping the routine is actually the easy option during the pandemic, because science tells us that the well-rested child is more willing to start their day in a more positive and energetic way than the child that's sleep deprived or sleep disturbed. And your ultimate goal is to help your children just have the best day that they can have. When my children were remote learning for summer break, we still kept their morning and bedtime routine. It was hard for them. They would see the neighbour children out, summertime, they would see them out at 10 o'clock, or they would hear them, from their rooms. And, we kept encouraging them and telling them that they will have a better day tomorrow if they're rested. Psychologically, we want our children also to think that remote learning is not too different to a regular school day. When you're dressed and you're groomed for the day, you generally have a better mental disposition and a better emotional disposition. And I do think that this is really important during this lockdown. Anything to improve our mental state and our levels of positivity is really what's going to help us get through. I do think that the worst thing you can do right now is have a complete upheaval of all the household schedules and just throw the towel in and say, why bother? It really doesn't give the children hope that we're going to get through this. They still have school and we still have work, and I guess that's the bottom line, right? So I guess I liken it also to being sick with the flu or the cold or a cold. When you're sick with the flu, you stay in bed in your pajamas for like days on end, and you don't really get out of bed and you don't brush your teeth and you don't take a shower and all those things. But then you have the day that breaks, right? There's that one day where you suddenly feel recharged and you feel a little better. And that's the day that you get up and you take your shower and you have something to eat and, you head outside into the fresh air. That's often the day that you improve and you feel better. Well, staying at home during the pandemic is sort of like that too. If you continue to stay home and you lounge around and you have no routine or schedule and you don't maintain your personal grooming habits, and the children too, you start to feel foggy, lazy and sluggish. And so imagine that this is your child. We all want our children to wake up and feel, excited and ready for the day. And just getting ready for the day and tackling the day positively, it has such a tremendous good right now during this hard time. And so let's just briefly talk about the eating. One of the things that we can do is really, nourish our bodies as part of the routine. Children, as we know, are in this incredible rapid growth for physical and emotional and mental growth. And, we've been home, as I said, since early March. In America, it was really, really crazy. I vividly remember I went to the store and people stared at me like I was this crazy doomsday person because I was, you know, stocking up on all the non-perishable items in my cart. And lo and behold, a week later, the supermarket shelves were bare. I think hand sanitizer was selling on Amazon for hundreds of dollars. I saw some selling for like $1,000, and we were in full quarantine lockdown, especially here in the Detroit area. It was bad. We were one of the top 3 worst hit areas in the country, and so everything was shut down. And I was hitting myself for not going back and getting more non-perishable items, but you know, the pandemic has really been a great reason for my husband and I to engage in some very real conversations with my children about food and access to it. And, you know, my children are already pretty good eaters. I usually have one that will complain about what I eat, and I'm not naming any names, but it's Rhea. And, you know, she's my second one, but she'll always complain. But we have some conversations, and it was something like this, you know, children, it's really difficult to get food right now. It's very expensive. It's very hard for us to go to the store. You know, we should be lucky that daddy has a job and we can afford to get food, but we have to eat what we eat and we can't waste it. And that was generally the conversation we had. And, you know, I have to tell you, I've never before seen my children fully clean their plates. That in my entire time of parenting, I really think that resonated with my children, and they definitely, you know, opened up their minds a little bit more to things like eating well, food, respecting food, waste. And there were many child-initiated discussions about, during the pandemic, about food and about meals and appreciating it. There were many times when I heard my daughter, my oldest one, Vera, should say, you know, we're so lucky we have food, we're so lucky daddy has a job and we can eat fresh fruit. And so they definitely started to appreciate what made it to the dinner table. And they would see their father go off in a mask to go get our food, and then they would watch that process of us spraying and wiping it down. And it really was this huge lesson for them in food appreciation. And so my point is really that, you know, yeah, the pandemic is really hard, but it's also this wonderful opportunity to teach our children a different aspect of food that we already know. You know, the slower pace of quarantine also means that we don't have as many places to go, so we can engage in these slow and relaxed family cooking, you know, explaining things and taking time to clean up the mess. Ordinarily, my children say, can I help you? And I'm like, no, I don't have time to clean up your mess, you know, but now I do. And so the main goal is really to break down those barriers and let the children appreciate food. During the pandemic, I ordered little aprons for my children. I actually was going to bring it to show you and I forgot, but my 7-year-old son, Anik, he said, oh, mummy, you know, one of the reasons why I love to cook with you is I get to wear my apron. And so little things like this can actually encourage a child to connect with food and enjoy being in the kitchen. And that connectivity actually makes children better eaters. And so have children help you with the process. You know, it gives us that never before seen opportunity to connect and appreciate it and cook together. You know, Dana did tell me that a lot of the Modernites are doing a lot of cooking and baking, and I was so happy to hear that. This is so wonderful. And, you know, we did the same too. We made a lot of things that we ordinarily would have bought before. I made a lot of pasta from scratch and pizza dough. And, you know, you can learn mathematics. I mean, my fourth grader, she just finished fourth grade, they learned fractions. And so she got a thrill out of learning, you know, or applying what she knew to measuring food and all of that. And my younger ones enjoyed reading the recipes. So, you know, there's definitely a lot to be learnt there. Some of the tricks we can do during the pandemic or we can implement is, you know, just putting things in order the night before so that our day is a little bit more seamless, especially when we have to work. So, you know, you can order food ahead, have snacks ready, have fresh fruit ready, just knowing what's in your pantry and being able to take a stock take of your fridge and your pantry and knowing what's needed, making sure the children have access to healthy food options, because it's so helpful when they don't have to interrupt you for a snack and they can go and help themselves. You know, with the stay-at-home orders now, as soon as breakfast is finished, our day immediately commences. We've removed that morning commute. And in my house, My husband used the morning commute to go grab his bagel and his coffee in the morning on the way to work. But now we've eliminated that. So we need to be much more efficient at breakfast time. So breakfast, you can hard boil eggs ahead of time, keep the cereal bowls ready, keep fruit ready. I make a lot of muffins ahead of time, keep it all ready so that when we start school and work simultaneously, it's a little bit more seamless. In our house, which we did before the pandemic and we continue to do, is my rule is I don't do any hot breakfast on a school day. So a hot breakfast is like eggs, pancakes, French toast, bacon, omelets. They just simply take too much time, and there's a lot of cleanup as well. And so on school days, like I said, I make a lot of vegetable-based muffins, like zucchini or carrot, and they're on hand. The children can help themselves. They can grab a yogurt or a glass of milk, a piece of fruit like a banana, usually, because that's really easy, as opposed to an apple, which will take half an hour to eat. And things like that can really help kids move along faster and make this approach during remote learning more swift, and get them to their workstations a little bit more effective. My husband, he's a doctor, and so he actually was not working from home, and it was me versus 4 children, and I didn't have any additional help, and I was potty training my 2-year-old as well. And so these were the tools that I really heavily relied upon, just to be as efficient as possible. So if we were to quickly recap, we know that routine offers predictability. We know that the sleep is really going to help with those questions of what am I doing? Every day is the same, that mundane feeling. We need the stability. We need, children's feet anchored. So keep those routines. And everything will run smoothly. As a parent, we are their one constant, and the worries of the world need not rest on their shoulders. I mean, that's our job as the parents. And as I said, this is a rare time that beyond books and Zoom classes, we can really teach our children some life skills. We've talked about cooking, and, we can take it one step further. Why not make a meal and deliver it to a friend or someone in need, someone who's alone or unwell? Maybe package some nice baked goods and deliver them as a gift to a loved one. We made a lot of homemade fudge and muffins during quarantine, and we had a lot of fun wrapping them up and then deciding who we would deliver them to, and my children would write little notes and letters to go with it, and we all got in the car and we dropped it off. And these simple acts of cooking and baking turned the project into acts of kindness, actually, that the children really learned from. There's plenty to learn from. Have your children write old-fashioned letters. We did that a lot too with family and friends. I set up email addresses so the children would write almost daily, especially to my family and friends back in Australia. They got a real kick out of waking up in the morning and seeing what emails were waiting because of that time difference. And so we formed book clubs. The children were raising money for charity. We reorganized the house. We took on more household projects together than ever before. My children helped me tremendously with my 2-year-old, and they really got to see and appreciate my role as a primary caregiver. They appreciated their father working more because they would see him come and go, and even the things that they had to give up, like going to the zoo or the park. They just developed newfound appreciation. So I definitely saw a tremendous amount of interpersonal growth in my children, and maturity and deep commitment to community and global health issues. And projects where they would put their mind together. These are the bracelets they were making, and they were selling them and making money for charity. So there were so many incredibly creative things that the children were doing that were charitable and kind-hearted and wonderful. And you can find what is appropriate for the grade levels, and you can engage in them too. You can do a parent-child book club and have the younger children draw pictures and share them at mealtime. But really anything to get the children off the devices is going to be the key. Exercise is another great, wholesome tool to really make sure that everyone is healthy during the pandemic. There are a lot of great exercise videos online, stretches and dance activities. Maybe go for a walk after dinner if it's safe. You can take your art outside. Parents can find a nice tree and sit with the children and sketch and turn those sketches into cards. We put together a Corona Get-In bucket list. Some of the fun things that we did was we learned to count from 1 to 10 in 6 different languages. You know, we read to friends over FaceTime a book. We flew a kite. We had a family staring competition and I won, of course. We made food from every continent. You know, we had a lot of fun. I think the children enjoyed writing the list and they got satisfaction out of systematically going through and ticking things off. And that really rounds up everything that I wanted to talk to you about today. I really wanted to thank you all for listening to my thoughts on routine and how to offer your children a wholesome experience during the pandemic. I know it's super difficult right now, especially for those of you that are working from home and struggling with schooling and being remote. You know, none of us are perfect parents. I think, you know, we all try our best. We're trying to stay positive. We want our children to be safe and loved and happy. Be gentle and kind to yourselves. It's okay to reflect and have a day when you feel like, wow, it was a failure. I had many days like that. Days when my 7-year-old was just struggling with his remote learning. And, you know, the pandemic is hard. It's really hard on the children. They're not seeing their friends and their beloved teachers. So, you know, and they have to wear masks. I mean, the biggest lesson you can pass on is that they're important, the children are loved, and that this will pass. God bless you all, and I would be happy to take any questions. I'm sorry if I've gone a bit over the time, but thank you so much for listening.
No, ma'am. When such amazing inputs as a parent are being given by you, then time is just not the factor to be considering. But there is a question from an audience who has asked that, did you feel bad while putting your career on the back burner to raise your children? How do you feel about that?
Yes, that's a really good question, actually. I have this conversation with both my husband and my friends all the time. I don't feel bad per se. I think I feel torn because the time that I took a break from my career was really a time when I had done all the hard work in the beginning of my career, and I was at a stage where I could really walk into a really great job or take on a real career promotion. And it was almost career suicide. I kind of took this break at a time that would be really pivotal to advance in my legal career. And so I don't feel bad, but I have these moments of yearning. I think that's a really good way to put it, where, especially when I see my friends in their legal careers that didn't take a break, and most of them are partners of law firms now. I've got friends that are managing counsel of huge companies in Australia, and there's a wistfulness, you know, this feeling of yearning and missing the challenge, missing being around, you know, other people in this dynamic environment, being able to, you know, really be recognized for your talent and your leadership. And so, you know, when I do feel like that, I get the cuddles from my children, or they'll look up at me and they'll say, "Mummy, you're the best mummy." And, you know, it makes it all worth it. It's this little bit of self-gratification that goes in with that. And I do believe wholeheartedly that I will return back to work in some capacity. I'm not someone, I don't think, that will stay home forever. I just think right now, with my husband's schedule, 4 children, it's really conducive to having one parent at home. And so I know that at some point I will go back, and that keeps me going.
Absolutely amazing to know that. And hats off to you, ma'am. You're really doing an amazing job. And the other question that we have with you, for you is that how do you manage your children with the technology? I mean, as a parent, do you advise the usage of technology to keep your children busy? I mean, in terms of the gadgets that you allow them to use, do you allow them to use any gadgets at all?
So as I mentioned earlier, I do allow gadgets, but it's in a very within definitive parameters. So they have it supervised. I don't know if you can tell, actually, I'm in a family study, and the children's computers stay here, so they don't take computers to their bedroom. So if they do want to use a computer, they have to ask permission, and then it's usually within a supervised environment. And then I give them a parameter too. So just say now it's like almost 9 o'clock my time. I would say, okay, you have until 9:30, and I will give them what is allowed. I often find my son on YouTube, and I'll come in and I'll say, and he's like, I'm sorry, mummy. So I do allow it. They do know the rules. I don't think they will never have a phone. I know that's a double negative, but I do think that at some point they will have a phone and they will have more access. I think my children being 2 to 10, they lack the maturity right now to not only understand the dangers of social media and the internet, but just proper usage. I mean, I think my 10-year-old, if I gave her a phone, she would lose it. So, you know, I just don't think that they're really of a mature mindset to be able to independently have gadgets and technology, because I don't think they can independently decide whether they can turn it off as well. I think that they would take it to their room, they would be on it. And so I would urge parents that if you do want to find that balance and offer your children technology, there has to be very real discussions about it and also rules about it. I don't think you can say that there can be no technology, not in this day and age. And we've seen that with remote learning, that you would really put your children at a disadvantage. I did notice that actually with my 10-year-old. She had a really young teacher this year who was like in her 30s. And this teacher was really pushing a lot of the apps and a lot of online platforms. And half the class, being 10, was still without phones and technology. The other half, a lot of the children had phones already. And you could see the difference in the divide between the two. And my child, who's extremely bright, I mean, she's grade levels ahead of where she is, she really struggled with the delivery of what she was doing, with the packages and the platforms she had to use. It wasn't the substance or the actual math or anything like that. It was, she would say to me, "Mummy, I don't know how to find the link. I don't know how to log in." And she would get frustrated, overwhelmed. And it was really a mental, you know, impediment for her. And I had a conversation with her teacher about it. I said, "You've got a very confident child who's feeling very challenged and defeated right now." So it's a really good example of reevaluating the position. And at that point, I did take stock and say, you know, maybe it's not such a great idea that she's so removed from technology, because she'll be moving to middle school next year. She needs to keep up with the advances as well. And my husband and I definitely had that conversation where we reevaluated during the pandemic and did bring in a little bit more, did help her through it. And, you know, so I hope I answered that, but I definitely think that for me personally, we don't have a no technology rule, but it's very, very limited. I know it's limited compared to a lot of my friends.
Well, that's amazing to know, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's the human to human connection that makes a lot of difference in the upbringing of our little ones. And I think technology can be used as an aid, but not really a caliper, right? So the last question for the session, ma'am, for you is that who gets to call the shots as a parent? Is it your husband or you?
That is a great, where is my husband right now? He needs to be available for the answer of this one. Well, he knows, and we all do, that it's me. No, very seriously, I actually do have a very definite view on this. So my husband, even though he's Indian and busy physician and all these things, is extremely hands-on. He is like the ultimate dad. He's an Uber dad. You know, yesterday he took all 4 kids alone by himself to a restaurant. You know, he's a great dad. And there are times where he does things completely wrong. And I can say that because it goes against logic. Like, he's taken my children out without shoes, or he's taken, you know, the baby out without a diaper bag, and then she's had an accident. And he's like, oh, well. And, you know, and I watch it and I just I sit back and I let him do it. Because for me, he's parenting, and that's the win,
Absolutely.
Right? And
Absolutely.
so I don't ever feel that I am an alpha parent. And I think that's the hot water that we fall into when one parent says, I am the alpha and everything I say is correct and everything I say is gospel. I think there's a lot of you can find yourself in a lot of difficulty, not only in your family, but in your marriage, I think. I think it's very important as parents that we recognize that we're not perfect parents. I am far from being a perfect parent.
Very true.
But I want my husband to be an active parent. And I feel it can be not only emasculating, but even if he wasn't a man, even if he was a woman and I was a man, it can feel as a human being such a disappointment to put your efforts in and be criticized. Because at the end of the day, I want him to be active, and I don't want him to then hear me say, you did that wrong. Why did you do this? Why did you do that? I'm not always correct, and he's not always correct. What I think and my approach is not going to be better than his approach or what he thinks. And I'm sure at some point my children will say, do you remember when daddy took me and I didn't have shoes on? And they will remember it really fondly, and they're not going to care. You know, they're really not going to care. It doesn't make his way of parenting any more legitimate than mine. I do think that we balance each other very well, because you have the rules and I am really, you know, the disciplinarian and the nurturer and all these things. And for, you know, the whole day, my husband's probably present for maybe 2%. And I often tell him, use the 2% wisely. If they're being naughty, let me be the bad cop. Like, let me be the scolder, because I tell them all the time, because I'm with them all the time. I can give them a cuddle in the morning. You won't be here in the morning to give them a cuddle. Let that 2% of your time be the best 2% ever. Like, come and tell me and I will scold and discipline them, because I don't want the entire 2% to be, he walks through the door and then he has to, you know, enact the rules and enforce them. And, you know, he should be the fun dad and taking them without their shoes and all of that. But I will say, I definitely lead. I think I lead the parenting decisions a bit more. If we're talking about leadership, it's probably more led by me. But I am more involved in their school and their social life. And I think I have a little bit more knowledge.
Understandable. That's understandable.
He's a great dad, so, you know, we partner well.
Absolutely. And I believe that parenting is an experience that nobody can actually do by a book. You just learn from your experiences and you share them forward with other parents. And that's how this experience becomes much better with every passing year till the time your children, because you are forever going to be a mother, right? You're forever going to be a parent. So that's a beautiful thing that you have done for us today, ma'am, because most of the time it depends upon a person who's actually into the hot water, like you said. And as a mother, you know this thing for sure. So I would like to take this opportunity to thank you on behalf of entire Modern School family, our audiences here, and really thank you so much for your time, for your patience and beautiful words. It means a lot to us, ma'am.
Oh, I'm so honored to be welcomed into the school community for the webinar. Thank you so much. Thank you for tuning in, everyone. I know that it's dinner time now and I talked forever. That's the attorney in me. I do apologize, but it was really
No, not at all. The pleasure has been ours. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
And we thank you once again for this wonderful session, ma'am. And we look forward to continue this association with you in future as well. We wish you all the best and lots of love to your family back there. Stay safe and stay happy. Thank you so much, ma'am. Good day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, ma'am. Bye.